United Nations first time guest orientation to answer all of your questions and for us to catch you up on what we've been doing for the last 3.5 years.
Okay.
My name is Brad Carson, and I'm the president of United Nations. Go ahead and introduce yourself, sir, and tell us what committees and
All right, let me do this here. And good evening. This is Andrew Williams Jr. I'm the chairperson of the United Hood Nation Communications Committee here with this monthly orientation with President Brad Carson.
Excellent. So if you don't want to get the live cast video, now's the time to say it.
Okay, so he's doing it to you, not to me though, right?
No, I think he's doing it to everybody.
If you so choose. If not, just let me know. You're public, right? You have the option. Now's the time to say yes or no.
Yeah, I'll stay out, because
Okay.
I don't, because I'm not sure, I'm here to observe for the first time. My husband will come, he'll probably be on camera.
No
Michael
problem. And introduce yourself, please.
My name is Andrea Ely with Prevailing in Christ Ministries, Prevailing Family Life Center here in
And
the
are you
Carson
related
area.
to Michael Ely?
I am.
All right. Are you his better half?
I am.
All right.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. All right. So, our purpose here today is to structure the community to be in support of ceasefires, gang truces, and anything else that's a lack of aggression from our young brothers and sisters in the urban communities, starting right here. The history came about on July the 5th, 2016, out in Sterling. Live death went viral. The next day, Philando Castile's live death went viral. And the next day after that, Micah Johnson killed 5 Dallas police officers and injured 9 of them. So at that point in time, Black Lives Matter, that was marching in the urban communities, inner cities, and now Blue Lives are marching, and everyone is upset. A Crip named Snoop Dogg and a Blood named The Game, both rappers, called up Minister Tony Muhammad of the Nation of Islam, called up Minister the Honorable Farrakhan, and then they did a march called Don't Hunt Me Now. And then they marched, like a Black Lives Matter type of march, to LA City Hall and essentially got the mayor and the chief of police to come here on July the 17th. 2016, along with, a lack of a better term, 2,000 or 3,000 real Crips and Bloods. They signed a ceasefire agreement, and we have been meeting here on Thursdays ever since.
Here where?
Here at the Church of Scientology
And the address
Community
is,
Center.
the address is what?
8039 South Vermont, the first Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. for 2 hours now, because that's how long it takes to explain all of this. So we're going to go over the agreements. Our job is to structure the community to be in support of the ceasefire, or another way of putting it, here is a legitimate, moral, and ethical form of income. And here is the income that is being the baseline of the economy in a subculture of the Crips and Bloods. It's our job to build a bridge, and the OGs and the conscious peacemakers said that if they had a legitimate, moral, ethical, sustainable form of income, that they would grab this culture over here, bring them over to this side, police their own community, and then police the police. And if you're down with that, say amen.
Amen.
So let me put it another way. The Crips and Bloods started right here, pretty close to, Washington High School, right around 108th in Normandy. And the Crips and Bloods have killed more black people than the KKK. And they do it every year, killing more black people than the KKK.
Right.
And they've been doing it for 50 years. Our purpose is to stop the violence and increase the peace. Three main players were, well, a whole lot of players, influential players came here, and that's what they said they wanted us to do. So they asked us specifically to structure that, and that's what this is all about.
Okay.
All right, next page, going backwards. So the General Assembly generally meets at 7 o'clock the first Thursdays after this orientation. We're going to push that back to 8 p.m. because now it takes 2 hours instead of 1 hour. Next page is the core values. Everything is double-sided and Xeroxed or copied to the 1,000th degree, so that's why it looks kind of funny. These are our core values that we've already agreed to. So I'm going to catch you up to all of our agreements. There's 9 of them. If there's any one of those core values you don't agree with, let us know. And for the record, compassion, forgiveness, honesty, integrity, love, loyalty, respect, tolerance, and unity. The name of this is United Hood Nation. There's 5 basic questions that was asked and answered for our strategic planning. They are: who are we? And what is United Hood Nation? What we do, why we do it, what do we measure for our success, and how do we pay our money? Go ahead and take 5 seconds and come up with those answers. All right, 5 seconds is over because we pushing the agenda.
Right.
Number 1, who are we? United Hood Nation is a collaboration, which is the next page. You see where it says, thinking about starting a co-op and have some questions to consider before meeting with the lawyer. Check out those 28 questions that we have asked and answered. I give you 30 seconds for that. So we have a co-op lawyer, essentially a CPA. We have a structure. We've asked and answered those questions. Next page. What we don't have is any money.
Yet.
We're working on the money, but when we get the money, we anticipate how the money's going to flow. Take a look on how the money flows on the money flow chart. I know it's a bunch of squiggly lines, but our communications team is going to clean all of this up.
Forthwith.
Alrighty. If you take a look at how the money flows, we are going to ask absolutely everybody to invest four things. Their time, their talent, their treasure, and their would-be taxes. We're going to ask everybody that. Everybody. Those four things. The money flows on two sides. We're going to have a nonprofit side and a for-profit side. We're going to have three basic entities that we're going to flow the money through. Nonprofit, so that if you want to get a tax deduction, then put your money in the nonprofit. We're also going to have our own bank, both a co-op bank and a commercial bank, and then variations of those banks, like a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, a CDC, a Community Development Corporation, so we can do microloans and boom, 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 boom. Economic Development Corporations, so that's on the banking side. And then we're going to have a for-profit. The for-profit is, the main for-profit is in the form of a limited liability company, so that the taxes flow down to each member. And it's a co-op. And we're going to talk about co-op a little bit later. And it's for-profit. The whole idea is to own and control equity. That is the whole idea. With that, there's going to be a whole list of nonprofit functions, including having our own grant writers and grant writing divisions, particularly those things that don't make a profit. We're going to put them over here on the nonprofit, as well as volunteer, people that want to volunteer. People that want an equity share, ownership, is going to be on the for-profit side. Then they're going to reach in their pocket and pull out their time, their talent, their treasure, and their would-be taxes. So the treasure side goes on this side, and they get an equity share. Now, interestingly enough, a nonprofit can actually invest in a for-profit. And in return for that investment, they can get an equity share themselves. And it could be, I'm not a CPA or a tax accountant, and don't take it as such, but it could be under their own mission statements, what's called a program-related investment. It could be tax-free. We'll find out. On the for-profit side, we want to create all types of funds. A private equity fund, like I think the biggest one is Blackstone. And Blackstone has a launch pad at USC, as well as several others. Well, they use basically a Shark Tank model of professional services for business incubators, business accelerators, innovation labs, and hubs. We want to do the same thing. In fact, we don't want to reinvent the wheel or rediscover fire. Whatever works, we want to work it for ourselves. And we want to take our own people and launch whatever idea that they have, because we believe that there are full of geniuses out there, and there's billion-dollar ideas, trillion-dollar ideas, like Dr. Dre, in every community, including our own. And we just want just a little piece of it by a collective group investing in that. And of course, we want our own banks. And then from there, we're going to go to our own structure of our own 4 basic working groups that we have structured. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So far, I've been doing all the talking. Do you have any questions?
Not
at
yet,
this
I'm
point?
just observing. I'm absorbing.
All right, moving on down the line. We want to meet people's needs when they need it the most. and we use the basic concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you familiar with that concept?
No.
All right, write that down and Google that,
Okay, I'll go.
because that's basically what we're doing. We want to meet everyone's needs when they need it the most. Now, in order to do that, we will have to find out two things: what you do best, what you need the most. We're going to take from our own group what people do best to cover what people need the most. So let's say that I am Stephen Curry and I can shoot 3-pointers. And your son or daughter wants to shoot like Stephen Curry, and you are an electrician. I need my electrical wires fixed. You need to learn how to shoot like Stephen Curry. We just exchange services amongst ourselves. That's our basic premise.
Okay.
What is it that you do the best? What is it that you need the most? Next page. We are actually going to target Crips and Bloods is our main targeted population. And in that, we're going to look at our reentry system, our mass incarceration, and how we plan on dealing with it structurally. Take 30 seconds, because this paper right here is very enlightening, and read that one from a re-entry point of view. So what we are advocating, educating, and promulgating is for our members, and we do have a definition of membership. There's two things in order to be a member. One, you got to pay $50 a year, like Costco's. And the other one is the second is you have to take this collaboration, or at least watch this collaboration video. And the third rule of being a member is there's no third party backbiting, he said, she said conversations. Those are basically the three things of membership. The he said, she said, there's a video on that. And basically how all black movements have failed, it failed right there. And he said, she said. So how that works, a common tactic is, I want to stop you two from uniting. So I go over to him and say something bad about you, that you said something bad about him, then I go to you and say that he said something about you bad, and next thing you know, you guys are fighting. Like the Crips and the Bloods 50 years later.
Right.
There's none of that if we're going to survive.
Absolutely.
Now, unfortunately, we haven't quite figured that one out yet. As a people, every movement has failed
So far.
so far, except for this one. But we haven't got the money yet. All right. So the basic bottom line to this is we want to do 10 things, which isn't on that piece of paper. We want to own and control the land, including the air, water, and mineral rights of the land. We want to then build on the land, which is the construction, building, trade industry. We want to do business on the land, and we call that social enterprise. So we're encouraging everybody. We want to educate our own people. We want to mentor our own people.
I was wondering where I put this. Got on my right.
We want to train our own people. We want to hire our own people. That's why we need our own businesses.
Right.
We want to recycle our own dollars within our own community. We want to take responsibility to do that and be held accountable to do that. We want to design, build, and then maintain our own safe, environmental, healthy, resilient, smart communities with a legitimate moral and ethical form of income.
Right.
That's what we want to do. That's what we must do. Otherwise, we're out.
Right.
Called gentrification.
Right.
With that said, go to LA County Small Business Vendor Registration, register your small business. Then make sure on the left side of that website that you get certified as a social enterprise, and then look and see how much you can get paid. $300 per person per month as a ratio of 30 people to 1 staff. And that includes staff members that have a lived experience of being incarcerated. To meet these basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs and services. Alrighty. We want to encourage everyone to do that. 30 people times $300, that's $9,000 a month. With that said, we also have to deal with structural, systemic, institutionalized race with an ism. The ism is the structural, systemic, and institutionalized implementation of race. Race is a man-made concept, does not really exist. There's only one race, and who is that?
The human
The
race.
human race. So somebody came up with a philosophy, an ideology of race called white supremacy. And is just that, to extract the resources from one group, let's say black people, extract the resources from black people to transfer it over to white people. So they created race. Just created it.
Made it up.
Made it up. White supremacy. And then they came up with a structure, systems, and institutionalized the whole process of isms. What isms are that we're talking about? We're talking about imperialism, colonialism, sexism. Obviously, we're talking about racism, classism, but we're also talking about capitalism. We're going to go with the structure of capitalism right about now. You got any questions on this one?
No, not yet. I was gonna ask you, like, do you guys have an area? You said the land, own the land.
Yes.
Is there an area that you guys are focusing on?
Yes, there is. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So let's talk about the structure of capitalism from what's called a Western Hemisphere mindset or Western civilization mindset. That's just a nice way of saying the Greeks, through Alexander the Great, took over what the Europeans would call the known world. And then the Romans, right after them, took over that. And then essentially Great Britain. And then that's why we speak English. All right, so capitalism has a structure from that point of view. And by the way, we want to look up the basic definition of capitalism so that we're not confused with socialism or communism. Because I am a capitalist. I just don't agree with the structure. And the structure of capitalism looks like that. In our Western Hemisphere mindset. And at the top of that is I'm running out of ink. Your board of directors. Then you got your CEO. Then you got your middle managers. And then you got your worker bees. That fits really nicely into classism too. Really nicely.
Upper class, middle class.
Yep. Your board of directors and your CEOs make up about 1%.
1%.
And then they make all the rules, policies, laws, regulations, directives, procedures, protocols. For who? The 99%. Now, if I'm making up all the rules and policies, laws and legislations and protocols and procedures to be implemented by the 99, I'm going to do it in my favor. It's just natural human flaw. And ultimately, the wealth is going to be transferred from the 99 to the 1%. Google that. It's your homework. Google that. Google the control. How much wealth and resources do the 1% have? It will astound you. All right, we good?
Yep.
What we're proposing is still capitalism. That means the private ownership of the means of the production of our resources and our services, as opposed to it being the state owned and controlled. So we're proposing changing the structure of capitalism from a triangle to a circle, which happens to be the co-op model. What are we going to do with the CEOs and the middle managers? We're going to put them right in the center of that circle. CEO and the managers. What are we going to do with the worker bees? They're still going to do what they do. And this is going to be our LLC corporation, limited liability co-op model. And the W-2 employees of that is going to have there's 7 basic rules of principles of a co-op. The number 1 is 1 member is equal to 1 vote. So the W-2 employees are still going to get 1 member and 1 vote. but they're also going to get what's called employee stock ownership participation of the entire structure. Equity. But not everybody's going to be an employee. So we're going to have 1099 vendors, one member, one vote. What did we just do to the decision-making process of the 1% using this format? Yes, we did. We took it from the 1% to the 99, actually to the 100%. Everybody's one member, one vote. So I seriously doubt that the 99% is going to ship off all of their jobs to China or Mexico or Taiwan in the NAFTA agreement or any other agreement. And then pay the board of directors and the CEO a huge bonus for doing that, finding cheap labor. What is our country based upon? Capitalism. Free land from who? Native Aboriginal people. Free labor from where?
Africa.
Black people.
Right.
Equals a huge profit. Let's make America great again. Who said that? Oh, I won't go there. Sure, you're gonna be great if you got free land and free labor, and you're running a capitalistic system, and you're gonna be great in what, 400 years? You know what I'm saying? You're gonna rise out from nothing. There he is. What's up, man?
Hey, all right.
All right. We got any questions on this model right here? No questions on this model? Because this is what we're doing. So, Mr. Ely,
Hey.
we're just trying to catch everybody up on what we've been doing here for 3.5 years.
Okay.
We want everyone to have a basic common knowledge of the concepts and of the structure. We're here to structure the community to be in support of ceasefires and gang truces to create a legitimate, moral, and ethical form of a local economy, even though we're in a global market. And we want that to be sustainable. We want to meet everyone's needs, and we have a plan to do that. And it's really based on 9 core values. With each core value, we have a corresponding code of ethics, and then ultimately in a code of behavior based on those 9 core values. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when we break those 9 core values, and everyone does break them, that's why we have grace.
Amen.
We have an ethics committee that we're going to get to in a minute. All righty. But before we do that, I'm going to give you my own personal opinion, my own personal belief system, my own personal core values,
Okay.
with the corresponding codes of ethics, by taking everything to the cross. So from a biblical, theological point of view, you could probably label me as a black liberation theologist.
I like that. I like that.
At the cross, I'm going to ask everybody from their own personal opinions, their own personal core values, their own personal belief system, what is the spiritual root cause of the problem? What is the social root cause of the problem, and what is the economic root cause of the problem. Because if we don't identify the root of the problem, then we would never bear the fruit. So, at some point in time, I'm going to ask you those three questions. We're going to have that conversation. Now, as a probation officer for the last 32 years, I'm going to ask everybody in this room another question. I'm going to ask, what happens to a community when jobs disappears from that community? And the answer is,
It does.
yes, it does. And I'm going to broaden that question out and say, what happens to any community when jobs disappears from that community? Then I'm going to shrink that up. You can keep yelling out.
Oh,
out,
word.
out.
He said
You
crime.
can, you can keep crying. I want that. That's a good one. That fits right into my speech. Keep yelling them out.
Oh, okay.
Then I'm going to personalize them and say, what happens to my community when jobs disappears? Then I'm going to broaden that concept out again and say, what happens to our community when jobs disappear? And we're going to break it down like that. What happens to the unemployment rate when jobs disappears? Fill it out.
It increases.
What happens to the poverty and welfare rate when jobs disappears?
It increases.
Homelessness.
What happens to the crime rate when yelling it out? What happens to the high school dropout rate or the uneducation rate when jobs disappears?
It increases.
In fact, take any social ill and ask the same question, what happens? It increases. So we want to, and will do, and have done a correlation. We're going to correlate 4 socioeconomic factors, circumstances, and conditions of capitalism. Unemployment, uneducation, poverty, and crime. We're going to correlate those 4 socioeconomic factors. And guess what that looks like? What does that look like to
A vicious circle.
you? A vicious circle, a downward spiral. Is unemployment related to crime? Poverty? Is poverty related to unemployment? Is crime related to high school dropouts? Is high school dropouts related to crime? In fact, from a criminal justice point of view, it has been said that children tested at the 3rd grade level for reading and math is predictive of who's going to be in prison. How old are people in the 3rd grade? 8? 9? Come on.
It used to be 12, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In
3rd grade.
Third grade?
Oh, no, I'm thinking.
3rd grade.
I thought it was at 12
Third
that they weren't reading, but it's the 3rd grade.
3rd grade.
Oh, wow.
So if the criminal justice system knows that, why don't we fix it at the 3rd grade or the 2nd grade or the 1st grade or in kindergarten? Anyway, when we correlate these 4 factors, they all come to one point. Right here. We're going to call that the nexus point. We're going to put a little circle right there, and I call that ground zero. We're going to draw a circumference around ground zero. And guess what that looks like? That's our bullseye right there. This is a known community, known for its high crime, high gang, and high narcotic activity. As a probation officer for 32 years, that's where I am at for 32 years. I'm right here at ground zero. And as a probation officer, I deal with what's called high-risk repeat criminal offenders. We call them HROs. And I have discovered in 32 years of being a probation officer that the majority of high-risk repeat criminal offenders come from 8 blocks this way and 8 blocks that way. So if I have a caseload of high-risk repeat criminal offenders, it's 8 blocks this way and 8 blocks that way. I've also discovered that the closer you are to ground zero, like where we're sitting at right now, then the higher the crime rate, the higher the unemployment rate, the higher the high school dropout rate, and the higher the poverty rate. The farther away you are physically from ground zero, then the lower the crime rate, the lower the unemployment rate, the lower the high school dropout rate, and the lower the poverty and welfare rate. And you know what real estate people call that in the real estate industry? Location, location, location. And how does that affect land value? Property value? Now that we know the community that as a baseline is feeding our crime, our unemployment, our high school dropouts, and our poverty and welfare, if we add just 3 more variables, age, race, and gender, now we know the targeted population within that community that feeds crime, unemployment, high school dropouts, and poverty. The age is young, the race is black, the gender is male. Young black males, the Trayvon Martins of the world. With the hoodie. And when this population is extracted out of this community to the tipping point, then it's young Hispanic males. They're extracted out of this community to the tipping point. Then it's young black females. Then they're extracted out to the tipping point and it's young Hispanic females. And then by that time, the young black men come back from jails and prison, and the cycle just repeats itself over and over again, and now it becomes generational. One generation after another of unemployed, high school dropouts, poverty and welfare, and crime. Generational. That's what we're dealing with. Does that make sense? Now, in order to change this cycle, we have to do 2 things. We have to change unemployment to employment and uneducation to education. Or another way of putting it is jobs must increase, education must increase in order to decrease crime, in order to decrease poverty. That's called an inverse relationship. So that when employment and education is high, that means crime and poverty is low. When crime and poverty is high, that means employment and education is low in that community. And since we know ground zero is where all 4 of these factors converge on one point, anything to the right of 0 is a positive 1 number. Anything to the left of 0 is a negative number. And now we can graph the whole thing out based on 4 social economic factors. And graph it out, called the function of x, and find the value of y. And now this has become a predictive model. We can predict everything. We can predict the tipping point of everything. We can baseline everything on just 4 socioeconomic factors and conditions. Any questions on that?
Makes a lot of sense. being able to articulate it categorically the way you've explained it, makes it more graphic. Makes it more graphic. I mean, I'm thinking 12-year-olds, you know, it is third graders, 8, 9.
Yep. Because by the time 4th, 5th, and 6th, right, now they're getting into higher math and they need that reading comprehension as well. By the time they're in the, you know, middle school, right, if they're not grasping those concepts, now they're, you know, they're not feeling it at school and they're going to gravitate towards the gangs. Especially when the hormones kick in.
Yeah. And we're not dealing with cause.
Yes. We're dealing with effects. If you don't deal with the root cause,
Right.
then all you're going to do is do this. That's all you're doing. You may be busy.
Yeah.
You may be doing a lot, but you're going around in a circle.
That's the way I feel. We kept losing kids at the 6th grade level because I kept thinking maybe it's this middle school, they haven't fully developed and now they're so influenced and conditioned, they don't want to play ball anymore. But systemically, I guess reaching into the cause.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think about the uneducated side of it, not reading,
Yep.
and emphasizing some tutorial for them would be better off for me to sustain them
Yep.
rather than to just keep pushing the play.
Yep. So what is it that we're dealing with? Structural, systemic, institutionalized race with ism. That's really what we're dealing with. In my opinion, the structure, the system, the institutions of race implemented through isms actually causes this and produces this.
Intentionally so.
Intentionally so. Through this structure.
Implemented through.
This structure. You missed that part.
Yeah.
Top 10%.
Mm.
The hierarchy.
We got this? Because that's a basic concept that we're building United Nations on structurally wise. This is all what we've already agreed to. All right, it's 7 o'clock. We've been talking for an hour. We get a 5-minute break. It's break time. The bathrooms are down the hall to the right.
Yes, sir.
All right.
If you'll send me your email address, I've recorded it so far, so I'll send you what you missed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
5 minutes.
All right.
Stretch your legs.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break here. We're with Brad Carson, the president of United Hood Nation. This is Andrew Williams Jr. I'm the communications chairperson. So I'm live streaming this monthly orientation session. It happens on the first Thursday of each month from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we're broadcasting here, and the public is invited to 8039 South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles, California. It's the Vermont Community Center. And Brad Carson will be available here, as I said, on the first Thursday of each month from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. for the orientation. I'll, in the meantime, go over some of the PowerPoints that or some of the pages that he's reviewed so far. Institutionalized racism. Okay, so
Would you like a bit of honey?
of course.
What you know about those?
Thank you so much. Only since 1963. And Macon, Georgia.
To the people. All right. So the 5 points, Youth Foundation organization. You're on Florence, huh?
Yeah, Florence and Western. Right next to Jack in the Box.
Okay, okay. I never got to your radio.
So, any questions? This is the question and answer period, so we can all catch up. What we've been doing for the last 3.5 years.
Thank you.
Right
That's
here
what Shell in the back.
Okay, very
at the
good.
Church of Scientology Community Center. United
Right
Good
here.
Nation.
Well, actually, there's 2 comments I'd like to make.
Yes, sir.
One is that in addition to the circumstances that you've described so far, there's one other, or at least one of 2 other factors that came to my attention in the last several months.
Yes, sir.
According to a study, it will take 228 years for the black wealth to accomplish the same level of wealth that the whites have at this point in time.
Well, that's not bad since they have a 400-year head start.
However, what that leaves out is any new factor. The factor I'm considering is foreign direct investment into the black community from the African continent, which is something that has not yet been seen, to the best of my knowledge, anywhere on this forefront.
Yes.
And the second thing is the Fukushima outreach or outbreak of the nuclear meltdown in Japan is not going to stop happening. Those people have got to go somewhere. So EB-5 money into our community is also another factor that hasn't been considered. So those are 2 of the factors I'd like for us to consider, particularly since Los Angeles, since you brought it to my attention. Oh, let me turn this around. Talk to myself. Brad Carson several years ago through the United UJCC, that United
Job Creation Council.
Jobs Creation Council, they actually hosted the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, and they reviewed all the statistics because the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Los Angeles bring in over 40% of the imports into the United States from Asia, and the LAX is one of the fastest growing and largest, airports in the world. However, they had no statistics for where we are, which is in South Central Los Angeles. So to the extent that we now have the Crenshaw LAX transit line coming in 2020, and we're looking for the 2028 Olympics, it's only now that we have the opportunity, if we so choose, to create our own data and actually control the data so that we can actually begin to plug into statistics so that we can actually be counted, and also we can also make a difference in our environments.
I agree 100%. And so you remember the 10 things that we have to do to own and control the land? 10.
Mm-hmm.
Including the air, water, and mineral rights of the land.
Yes, sir.
So, write this one down. Google buy the block.
Buy the block?
Buy the block. Buy the block.
Okay.
Buy the block. Just buy it up. Buy the block. And while you're Googling buy the block, because we have to own and control the land, Google Opportunity Zone Fund.
Opportunity?
Zone Fund. Because that's what we plan on doing. That to own and control the land, including the air, water, and mineral rights of the land.
Mm-hmm.
We have to build on the land, the construction, building, trade industry. We have to do business on the land, social enterprises. We have to educate our own people, mentor our own people, train our own people, hire our own people, recycle our own dollars within our own community. We have to take responsibility and accountability to do that so that we can design, build, and then maintain our own safe, healthy, resilient, smart, sustainable, environmental community. And if we don't do that, shame on us.
What would you say to, is it too late to think about the mineral parts and, because I know a lot of them, they'll sell you the property, but not the mineral rights. But how do you get them to release both of them, you know?
I'm glad you said that. So, from a community organizing point of view, all right, we have advantages and we have disadvantages. This is our structure here. And we, in the structure, are at the bottom. We're here. We're the base. And from a $1.2 trillion base economy that goes through black people's hands and then out the door within 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Or less.
We are the base that holds this capitalism up. We have the most people. Is at the bottom of the base, whether it's black or brown or whatever, because we live in a class society. If we organize the bottom,
When we organize.
the bottom, then we can take that to the top, to our board of directors. Then the board of directors, through their policies, rules, regulations, and laws, would then trickle it right back down to ourselves. Therefore, we can change any law, any policy that is not in our favor. We can change anything because nothing is permanent. It's all man-made. It's all made up. It's all based on an ideology called race. And it doesn't exist. It's a fabrication. But we have to unify the base in community organizing.
Also known as operational unity.
We good on that concept? Therefore, we can change anything that we want to
I get it. And the law.
on
Policy.
on a public policy level. That trickles down to the CEO, the middle managers, and to the worker bees. So it's one big circle, even though we live in a triangle. And speaking of triangles and circles, you remember that co-op model? Remember that co-op model where we have our CEO and our managers here? And then we have our worker bees out here. Remember that? We're going to put this model right at ground zero, where the crime, unemployment, uneducation, and poverty intersect. We're going to put that structure right there with our own people. That co-op model. And then, remember those small businesses that we want you to register your small business and get you a contract to provide Maslow's hierarchy of needs to our own people? Alright? You can still use your common triangle to do that, where you're at the top, making all the rules, policies, and regulations in your own small business. What we're going to do in the circle right here is tie everybody together and coordinate everybody's services, and we'll still make it a circle. See how that works? That's a main function of United Hood Nation. I want to find out what you do best. I want to find out what you need the most. I want to find out what you do best. I want to find out what you need the most. What you do best will cover her need. What she does best will cover your need. We do that collectively, contractually. We all come up. See how that works?
That's it.
Now, what he hasn't mentioned, and I'll bring it to your attention again at this point, Is that what you missed at the beginning? Is that this is based on the United Nations model, or I'm not sure if we got there yet.
We're getting there.
Okay, I'll wait until we get
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
All right, so that's an add-on.
Okay. Like coalition.
That's the function of United Nations. Now let's go over the structure of United Nations. Structural. Because we are here to structure the community to be in support of the ceasefire. When 2,000 or 3,000 real Crips and Bloods signed a truce or a ceasefire right here, July the 17th, 2016. All right, so we have the structure of a president. Man, I need some more ink. A vice president, treasurer, and a secretary. And for a lack of a better term, this is going to be our executive committee or our executive branch. We have four main functions or four main committees. And they are peace. For lack of a better term, we're going to call that United Hood Peace Committee, United Hood Job Creation Committee, United Hood Education and Literacy Committee, and United Hood Nation Interfaith Committee. So when 2,000 or 3,000 people got together, we gave them a survey of what they need the most and what they do the best. We also gave them we broke it down into four main functions for peace, and that is job creation plus education multiplied by faith equals peace. That's the formula we came up with. Job creation plus education and literacy rating. You can actually, if you're going to put that in a mathematical formula, it will look like that. Times faith multiplied by faith is equal to peace. That's the formula. Or another way of putting it, we're going to deal with the economics, the social conditioning, and the faith, the spiritual aspect of a person in order to achieve peace. So, from a structural point of view, these four main functions, each one of these has a chair, has a recording secretary, has its own mission, vision, purpose, goals, activities for those goals, and a budget. They hold their own meetings, they have their own network, and essentially they're really doing their own thing. Each one of these is doing that. Each one of these has their own chair, recording secretary, and budget. So those are the four main functions. Then we have essentially four support committees. Starting with, what number am I on? We'll call it 5. Starting with communications. So we have a communications chair. Mr. Andrew Williams, who's the communications chair of United Nations?
Andrew Williams Jr. is.
Mr. Andrew Williams Jr., right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We have internal affairs. And connected to internal affairs is the ethics committee. Because it's based on the 9 core values. The 9 core values is our code of ethics, our code of conduct, and nobody can keep the law. And we have a whole procedure when we break these core values. Then we have external affairs. And we have a judicial committee made up of a parliamentarian. The parliamentarian's job is to act as the judge of what we've agreed to for the last 3.5 years and interprets that constitution and those bylaws for all of us.
That's the attorney.
In this particular case is Nahasi Lee. He's the committee chair or the parliamentarian. But we all have the bylaws and the Constitution, and his job is to interpret that. When we argue amongst ourselves,
Okay.
argue is a strong word,
Yeah.
when we have a difference of opinion or interpretation.
All right.
So, collectively, this structure is United Hood Nation. Now, we can add any committee that we want. The executive branch has that ability in the Constitution. But right now, this is what we have. Oh, I left one out, didn't I? Because not only did we have
Interfaith.
Uh,
Plus interfaith peace.
we added a finance committee.
Oh,
Because everything we're doing now is all about the money, all fiscal matters. Right? Because we've pretty much already structured to pretty much everything else. Each chair now, 1 member, 1 vote. All the chairs come together on the 3rd Thursday, and collectively, from the executive, the president, vice president, 1 member, 1 vote, and each chair, we come up with the way to do whatever it is that we collectively choose to do, and then the means of whatever it is that we collectively choose to do. So therefore, this structure is now the Ways and Means Committee. Collectively, all the chairs, including the president, the vice president, treasurer, and secretary. So each committee comes up with their own budget, and then they push like a bill their activities to get essentially the way to get it done and the means to get it done. Like they're sponsoring a bill.
right.
Their job is politics or convince the other chairs to go with their budget, and to go with their activity, to fund it. And then we all get behind that. Essentially, we all show up. We all leverage our influence, our relationships, who we know, to support that activity. Collective. That's the ways and the means. And we do that the 3rd Thursday of the month. Now the General Assembly members can join any one of these committees. Anybody, any member can join any one of these committees. To be a member, you pay $50 a year. You take a collaboration, you watch a collaboration video, you watch a he said, she said, no third party video, and now you get to join any one of these committees. The members vote for their own chair. The chair votes at the Ways and Means.
Ways and Means meet on what day?
The 3rd Thursday of every month. Right here. And then we hash it out.
Okay.
That's the structure, that's the governance, that's how everything flows. You got any questions on that? So if you want to be a chair, you start off being a member.
Right.
And the chair runs their own program, basically, their own network. Then they come and bring it to all the other chairs. So essentially, this is a network of networks. a coalition of coalitions.
Right.
We just one member, one vote agree on what we want to do as a collective and get behind that. All right, we good? All right. Let's turn to the front of the page. So far we've been going from backwards to forwards, and now we're gonna go forwards to backwards. So there's 5 main sections of what we're talking about using Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They correspond with the 5 things of 1, the United Nations UHN is patterned after the United Nations. 2, the business entity of UHN is a limited liability company on co-op system. 3, the implementation structure of UHN is patterned after the LA's promise zones. 4, the campaign in UHN is patterned after Jobs Create Peace and the UJCI initiative, United Job Creation Initiative, which is number 5, the infrastructure design for the implementation of UHN clients is patterned after one-stops and day reporting centers as per the Jobs Create Peace flowchart. Next page.
Well, the point that I wanted to make since we brought this up, and I want just a brief insert. Number 1, the United Hood Nation is patterned after the United Nations.
Yes, sir.
There's actually a secretariat, and so that's what the Communications Committee has positioned itself to provide that support.
Oh, man, we appreciate that, and we need that badly.
Communication.
So, number 1, Roman numeral number 1 at the top, the United Nations system. And he just mentioned secretariat, and that would be right there. Bam. And Andrew Williams Jr. is pretty much I won't say an expert, but he is fundamentally sound on United Nations goals.
Well, yeah, and particularly there is actually the United Nations has an entry point called the United Nations Global Compact, where non-governmental organizations can join and participate. It's free. So as president of 5 Points Youth Foundation, that's one of the first things I did in 2014. And that's what I'm suggesting that we take that route too, so we can empower ourselves locally.
Excellent. All right. Number 2. Roman numeral number 2 is the business entity of UHN would be a limited liability company modeled after the Mondragon co-op system. I found one of those in the United. The Mondragon is in
Spain.
Spain. I found one in us ULU, us lifting us, and they gave us all their information for free. And this is their 10-point plan right here. Go ahead and take 20 seconds and read the 10 points.
Black prisoners and black institutions, especially the black church. Wow. Together as members are still cooperatively owned business enterprises to pool our resources. Cooperatively owned business enterprises reflect of our unique culture and interest in the world. Government legal forms of cooperative accommodate specific principles in one member, one vote for effect leadership. Only members of cooperative public have opportunities. Ownership. Focus on
So the Mondragon system is what, like $20 billion annually?
And growing.
And growing. All right. Romo, next page. Page 4 at the bottom. Still in Roman numeral number 2 at the top. These are the 28 questions that we asked and answered before starting a co-op. And before meeting with the lawyer, we do have a co-op lawyer. All right, next page, number 5. Page 5, Roman numeral 3. The implementation structure of UHN is patterned after LA's promise zones. So LA's promise zones is $100 million, and it has a map to it.
Well, actually, there are 2 promise zones.
There are 2 promise zones. One's in North Hollywood and the Pico Union, and the other one they call South LA. The population in South LA, in my opinion. So what are we going to do at UHN? We do not, or rediscovering fire. What we're going to do is cut and paste and put our name in there. So we're going to have UHN's promise zone right at the top. You see that? We're just going to cut and paste, baby. We're not reinventing nothing.
No.
So go ahead and read what? Take a minute and read pages 5, 6, and 7, and that's what we're going to do. In fact, that's what we're doing. So, our task is to structure the community to be in support of the gang ceasefire. We're going to pattern ourselves after the Mondragon system. We're going to pattern ourselves after